Game 10 of the World Chess Championship. We're already at game 10. Time flies when you're having fun. Before we get into the game, let me just say that if you want instant notification of when videos are posted, then do click on the subscribe button. And if you want to support the channel, then do check out patreon.com PowerPlayChess and check out the rewards. Depending on how much you contribute per month, you get free videos, newsletter, puzzles, opening playlists. Great way to study an opening. So do check out patreon.com PowerPlayChess. Okay, here we go. On with this game. Game 10. Ding Liren playing white. Remember, Nepo is a point up. C4 from Ding. Knight F6. Sound development. E5, knight f3, knight c6. So 4 knights, very orthodox so far. We saw Ding earlier in the match play e3. You can also play g3 here, but today we had e4, firmly blocking in the middle of the board. So that obviously just clamps down on the d5 square. d5 is prevented. But there is a drawback with playing e4. It's that it does weaken that square. And Nepo looked to exploit that straight away by playing the bishop to c5. You can also play bishop b4 as well. That's well known as well. But bishop c5. Now this leads to very forcing variations. Now white does not want to just leave this position like this because black has good control here. So something like this is very comfortable for black. After bishop c5, it's well known that white should plunge into these complications after knight takes e5. I mean, this whole line goes way back to the 1920s. Aaron Nimzowitsch, the great strategist, yes, him of my system fame. He pioneered this system with e4. Anyway, knight takes d5. What's the point? Well, after knight takes, you play d4. So white is not giving up a piece. White recovers this piece. So this is a very old line. Bishop b4 played. Pawn takes knight and knight takes e4. So now material is level again. Black is threatening to take here. Now several moves have been played here. Well, Nimzowitsch himself played queen c2. Queen d4 also possible. Queen d3. But Ding went for queen f3, which is accepted these days as, well, the best way to play, the most challenging way to play. And knight takes c3. That knight was attacked. Pawn takes, and the bishop is attacked. Now, the main move here, the most popular move here, is bishop a5. I mean, it has been tested in quite a few games. There, for example, there was a Carlsen Caruana game that went bishop a5, but I mean, many of the leading players have played with bishop a5. In fact, Ding and Nepo are not strangers to this position. But bishop c5 was played by Nepo. And Ding said afterwards, this came as a total surprise. Seems like lots of opening moves come as a total surprise to Ding. I mean, this has been seen before, but not in really top-level games. And certainly Ding, was the first to sort of have a think in this position. He spent just over 11 minutes on his next move. Queen g3. So it looks like he's been caught out by Nepo. Funny thing is, Nepo had actually had this exact position as white, and Ding didn't seem to realise that. All right, let's concentrate on the position. So queen g3, looking at g7, and that at first glance appears to be a slightly awkward move for black to deal with, because, I mean, you would like to castle. But this is very dangerous. Bishop g5, and if queen e8, then bishop f6. This is nasty. The queen is coming in. Or after bishop g5, bishop e7, so that's knocked the bishop back. Then you go for bishop h6, mate threatened. And if g6, well, you don't take the exchange. You just go for the attack with h4, h5, and this is incredibly dangerous. So the natural move castle just isn't very good for black. And g6 is also a little bit dubious, just bishop d3. This one is waiting in the wings. Again, h4, h5. And this is a very easy position for white to play. You can see that white has very quick development, very efficient development, very active pieces. This is not a lot of fun for black to play. So what should black play after this? Well, very quickly Nepo played king f8. So the king looks, well, misplaced on f8, because that means it's going to be difficult to connect the rooks, but actually it's not too bad on f8. It means that black is going to open up the position quite quickly, and then the e file is open. I mean, this is a curious position because white's pawns look pretty horrible, but there is compensation for that in that white, as I said, has very active pieces, and this pawn on e5 has sort of carved out territory. d6, so but Nepo obviously very comfortable with this position. He was playing quite quickly. Rook d1, yeah, active pieces. So all these pieces looking at the d6 pawn. Queen e7. So there's a pin here. So bishop e2 breaks the pin and prepares perhaps to castle. Now, should black be worried about this? Well, if pawn takes pawn, then this looks really nice for white. That swipes a pawn, and that's not a very nice move. Here the king doesn't look too well placed. So h5 from Nepo. Well, makes use of that rook on h8. And here's the thing. White would love to just block that pawn. But now black has this. Takes, and bishop g4. This is a really nice move, making use of that pawn. And white's king is a little bit caught here. You know, in this position, you would like to castle, but then that pawn could be taken, making beautiful use of that. And black certainly better in that position. Funny thing is, Nepo had exactly this position. He played h4 himself in an online blitz game, but Ding didn't seem to be aware of that. And Nepo actually got a very bad position. He tried king d2, which is an amazing move, and he ended up winning this blitz game. But obviously, having the king staggering across the middle of the board is not ideal. So anyway, that didn't happen, folks. After h5, Ding wisely did not play h4. Instead, he just castled. Okay, this is sound. So the queen was pushed. Queen d3. And now Nepo played g5. So this is very enterprising. Pushing up these pawns. I suppose the rook is here, so it does help the king a little bit. And the king now can come to g7. I mean, here white has a fundamental choice. You can either retreat the bishop, or you can go for an endgame. Okay, what happens if, let's look at the active move, the aggressive move. That's to keep the queens on. So bishop e3. Queen takes pawn. So this is a risk for white because white is now a pawn down. But there's a certain amount of compensation here, and that straightens out the pawns, gives white a nice centre. Now, how much compensation does white have here? Now, Ding was looking at this. He judged there wasn't enough. And indeed, if you feed this into a computer, it thinks that black is absolutely fine here. Black is a pawn ahead. The king can come here. It looks solid enough. But still, if you wanted to really go for it, you could try that with white. But instead, Ding decided to take on d6, which basically goes into an endgame. I mean, this is pretty much forced. Lots of pieces exchanged, and bishop e6. So white is a pawn up, but it's not a great extra pawn. It's these doubled pawns. And this king is going to reach a very safe square. This bishop is so chunky on e6, supported by that pawn, looking in both directions. That'll help to cover the king, but also, you know, it's beautifully placed. So why did Ding go for this? It looks like black is very comfortably placed here. Well, f4. Of course, he'd seen this before he went in for the endgame and realised this is white's best chance. And this, after this, it does break up those pawns, does give white a few chances. So if here, then f5, I mean, that's obviously very good for white. So king e7, first of all, attacks the rook, which came back, and then pawn takes pawn. Attacks this one, so h3. And now the only chance for white is to try and keep as many pawns on the board as possible, so g4. And that gives the king a little route into g3 to attack that pawn. Rook c8. So we can see black is gaining counterplay against this pawn and possibly coming up the board as well. Although a king f2 played, and yeah, it looks good coming to g3, although obviously white is a bit better here. You could say white is a pawn up, not the best pawn, but you know, it's a clear pawn up. And this is a little bit vulnerable. The problem with this position from the point of view of playing for a win is that any simplification somehow leads the game closer to a draw. So, for example, an exchange of bishops, well, rook and pawn endgames are notoriously drawish, and even if you exchanged all the rooks, well, actually bishop endgames can be very drawish as well. Okay, if white manages to actually take that pawn cleanly, then that's another matter. But still, you know, often you need knights to create problems in an endgame. Rook c5, good move, activating along the 5th rank, looks very nice. a4, so that basically shuts out the rook, otherwise it had potential to come down here. And b6, super solid play from Nepo. Everything's protected. King g3 looks good, attacking this pawn. And rook h6. So just coming up the board, you never know, it might swing across to one of these squares. Rook e4. Well, that has this idea of playing to d5, looking at that rook, just exploiting the pin. So the king dived out. Well, that allowed the rook to enter into the position on a8. But actually Nepo defended very well here. He didn't panic at all. You could bring that rook into the game. I mean, he played rook c5 here. You could bring the rook into the game like this. Rook d6, that's also very interesting in order to activate this rook down here. But he played rook c5, also very solid, and he wasn't worried about this. Although white is a pawn up here, you could say an even cleaner pawn up or slightly cleaner pawn up because one of those double pawns has disappeared. Problem is every pawn exchange brings black closer to a draw, and it does mean that black is getting through to this pawn here. So this extra pawn isn't really worth very much. Rook e7. Rook c6, very nice, coming into the game with some pressure here. And now Ding just played rook e5. Okay, what about king takes pawn? Let's look at this. I mean, to me that looks like a better try. Bishop e6 would be a nice move, just breaking the communication between these rooks. And of course preparing to take on c3. And then rook d6, this rook might want to come down here, you never know. Let's say h3 here, and here's a nice move. Bishop d7, that cuts off the rook on the 7th. The rook might want to come to h6. I mean, that's just one little sample line, but it shows you it's very, very difficult for white to make anything of this position in spite of the extra pawn. I mean, this is the extra pawn. It can't really go anywhere. And actually, white's king needs to be a little bit careful. Black is very well coordinated. The king is completely safe. Black's going to make a draw here easily. So Ding played rook e5, which actually allowed a simplification very quickly. Rook takes, and bishop b3. Nice move, little tactic. Bishop takes bishop, rook takes check. Rook takes pawn, rook takes bishop rather. And now we have level material, and the position just burned out very quickly. And now f5 exchanges more pawns. And the players went through the motions. Of course, king and pawn endgame is a complete draw, and so Ding just decided to give back the extra pawn, and that's a draw. So even though Ding switched opening again, trying to surprise Nepo, well, Nepo was very well prepared in this game. Bishop c5 was preparation, slightly unusual move. It caught Ding out. As he said, this move came as a total surprise, so it shows that Ding's preparation just isn't that thorough, although he's enterprising with the lines he's choosing. But I think Team Nepo's preparation is definitely superior. There's been this leak of information. Well, we don't know the exact truth behind this, but it seems as though some training games were available on Lichess. And Nepo was asked about this again, and he said, you shouldn't exaggerate the significance of this somehow. So, yeah, there we go. Nepo is a game closer to winning the title. He's still a point ahead, but still 4 games to go. Ding is still in with a chance.